Disney's £170 million remake of Snow White could face ruin after a series of woke public interjections by lead actress Rachel Zegler. The 22-year-old has sparked furious backlash among fans of the kids' classic after admitting she hated the original 1937 movie, calling the storyline weird and slamming Prince Charming as a stalker.
Now listen, if Disney wants to make more woke films that tank at the box office, they are more than welcome to do that, but maybe think of an original idea. Maybe not destroy a classic from my childhood and put an actress in there that not only hates the plot and the storyline of the movie she's in, but also seemingly hates Snow White, the character herself.
I'm a really big Disney fan. I grew up at the Disney parks. My parents took me every summer. It's like, it's part of my upbringing. It's my favorite thing, so.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Never revisited Snow White again. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
We don't just sit around and say, yeah, we grew up watching this movie called Snow White, and all of a sudden you show up and we have to eliminate all the memories of these young girls who grew up wanting to have an experience like that?
The live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs seemed to be in a lot of trouble. Let's talk about it. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is an animated classic that's getting a remake. So Disney hired Rachel Zegler to play the lead character of Snow White and Gal Gadot, the Wonder Woman, and she's going to play the evil queen. Now this remake was a part of Disney's ongoing strategy to adapt its animated classics into live action films after the success of Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. Now, however, unlike those other films, Snow White has come under fire because Disney decided to change the game a little bit by making Snow White more palatable to modern audiences. Essentially, for lack of a better word, people, Snow White went woke. Now, you remember the story of Snow White, right? A princess who has to flee from her wicked stepmother, goes into the woods, meets seven dwarfs, and she gets saved by a prince, and they live happily ever after. Now, Disney didn't like these core pieces of the story, so decided to change it. Now, the first thing that had to go was dwarfs.
Disney's decision to remake the 1930s classic Snow White is coming under fire. Actor Peter Dinklage, known for his Emmy-winning role on Game of Thrones, calls it a backward step for little people on Mark Maron's podcast.
You're still making that backward story of seven dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
West Side Story breakout star Rachel Zegler is cast as Snow White in the live-action remake.
Tonight.
They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White, yeah. Seven Dwarfs. It makes no sense to me.
Now, this was after actor Peter Dinklage, who happens to be a dwarf, complained that, hey, the portrayal of dwarfs in Snow White is not up to modern expectations. Take a look.
There'll be a mix of genders, ethnicities, and of course, heights, because they felt that, quote, the story needed refreshing, including getting rid of, I guess, the offensive white skin of Snow White, who is traditionally a fair German princess with, quote, skin as white as snow. But you see, even that is offensive. It's fine to say that the white skin is offensive. No one can take offense at that statement. Replacing a white woman in one of this classic, roles that's supposed to be a white person with a person of color, no problem. But if you even have a white person voice the part of an ethnic cartoon, you will be canceled.
Now, Zegler responded to the backlash by saying that she was proud to be a Latina princess and that Snow White was a big deal in Spanish-speaking countries. She also posted pictures of herself dressed as various Disney princesses as a child and asked fans not to tag her in the nonsensical discourse about her casting. So, as you just heard Megyn Kelly allude to, instead of having seven dwarfs who were Snow White's protectors and companions throughout the story, we're going to have a diverse group of forest-dwelling individuals who happen to be magical. Now, they're not at all dwarfs. They're going to have different names, different sizes, different genders, different personalities. Now, there will be one dwarf among them, but you know, you had to keep something from the original story there. Now, some fans obviously accuse Disney of being disrespectful and unfaithful to the original film and to the fairy tale. And they argue that the remake is unnecessarily woke, and no one wants this.
Disney is one of the biggest problems in the wokeification of America. It's a complete betrayal by a company that a lot of parents for decades trusted implicitly. They've decided to go another way. And the latest example is the DEI forces have descended on the Seven Dwarfs around Snow White in Disney's latest offering. Now there's only one dwarf and like a bunch of DEI boxes checked behind the one dwarf because they don't want to offend little people, so they had to eliminate their jobs, I guess. And Snow White herself is not white, so everybody's been racialized to check every box they can, except for all the dwarf boxes because they're offensive. I guess you can only have the one dwarf. That's not offensive, but the six more would have been.
Now, the film was originally set to start shooting in March of 2020, but faced three major setbacks. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic stopped everything, and then we had the writer's strike and the actor's strike. So now the film is delayed again, and some are claiming that the movie's just doomed. Now, after much mockery, the new Snow White movie, which was originally scheduled for release in 2023, now has that release date pushed back to 2025. And the price tag that Disney has paid for this movie is a whopping $330 million. So what did Disney do? Disney saw that they may lose money off this movie, decided to reverse course and pull back on some of the wokeness. For instance, they dropped the woke, magical, diverse people and went back to actual dwarfs.
Disney is pushing back the release of its Snow White live-action movie until 2025, a move that conservatives attribute to the movie's giant attempts to be woke. Conservative critics pointed out Disney's rendition initially cast diverse men and women instead of dwarves to play the entourage of Snow White, but since scrapped that idea in favor of CGI dwarves. Now, the studio says Disney's Snow White has been delayed a whole year because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, which forced studios to reshuffle their release schedules.
Now, conservative outlet Daily Wire is making its own version of Snow White, and that's sparking some controversy. The fascinating part about this is listen to the two actresses describe their views on the modern world.
Meanwhile, a clip of side-by-side actresses, Rachel Ziegler, who was cast to play the princess in Disney's Remake, and Brett Cooper, who will play the same role in the Daily Wire's version, has gone viral. Take a look. First, here's Ziegler.
Said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
So then we have Brett Cooper of the Daily Wire.
By 2030, it's predicted that 45% of women will be unmarried and childless. And why do you think that is? Well, it's because we've been told that, men are trash and that our career is the only thing that matters and that marriage and children will inhibit that, which is unnatural. That is biologically unnatural for women.
You get your choice.
You
get your choice, Jessica. There's left-wing Snow White and right-wing Snow White. So, isn't choice a beautiful thing?
Now for me, what the hell's going on here? I have to now watch a woke Snow White versus a conservative Snow White. What happened to keeping politics out of fairy tales? Like, really? Like, have we gotten to that point where we need to divide everything? I gotta go to a conservative pizza place or a liberal pizza place. It's like, this is ridiculous, right? Don't get me wrong. I do understand you wanting to make things more inclusive, but sometimes it becomes insanity. There's no reason for race swapping everything in the movie. You race swapped the dwarfs. You race swapped Snow White. It's like, it's insanity on top of insanity. For what reason? For what purpose? And the best part, I think, about this whole controversy is that Disney can just create more stories. We're talking about a story that's hundreds of years old. You can tell it in many different ways. It doesn't have to be Snow White in the Seven Dwarfs. It could be something else. But I think the fear of just creating something new from scratch may have just paralyzed this company. If you guys have seen the South Park critique of Disney, they're doing this with all of their characters. Essentially, all the male characters that we've known and loved have just been swapped out for female characters. And when Cartman says,
discussing ideas of what to do with the new Prince Eric movie. Put a chick in it, make her gay.
are you going to watch the new Snow White? Are you going to take your kids to go see it? It's interesting how something as a child's fairy tale movie has turned into a political football. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Peace.